podcast. I'm Bradley Stalder at FF Stalder, and tonight we're going to have Jake Estes come on and talk with us about some of the rookies. But before we get into that, I want to give a promo to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't downloaded the app, it's really slick. It's great. You can draft best ball teams. There's a super flex best ball tournament happening right now, freshman, sophomore tournament happening. And you can use the promo code FFF for 100% first-time deposit match up to $100. That's right. It's like a free tank of gas in this economy. Use promo code FFF at Underdog Fantasy. You can go to UnderdogFantasy.com, download the app on your mobile device, and use the promo code FFF. That'll give you a free $100 promo code. Draft with us, draft with me in the offseason. You'll see some of the boards and tag me as well. We love our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalists Podcast, powered by Underdog Fantasy and presented by Fantasy Data, home to some of the industry's most accurate rankings.
All right, Jake Estes is in the virtual house. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast. Happy to have you on. Jake does a lot of work with DynastyNerds and YardsPer. He's a fantasy analyst there, does rankings. And if you want to get in on those rankings, check out his Twitter handle at Dynasty_Jake. Jake, I'm trying to stall for you as you're working out your camera issues. But
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Talk to me.
Okay, I will get the camera fixed in a second. When you go on a tangent, I'll try and restart.
So Jake has gotten a little spicy on Twitter lately, but it's great having those Twitter conversations. This is the time of year to filter out the noise and try to decide what are the most important metrics, what are the meaningful measurables for these rookies, because right now there's just, I like this player, I don't like this player. Oh, it depends on his landing spot. Really, I've watched his film and he looks good, or I've watched his film and he looked bad, or even today, Jake, you posted Drake London doing a 540 dunk in basketball, or a couple days ago, there was high school footage of Kenneth Walker catching passes to try to justify the love of Kenneth Walker. So talk to us, Jake. What are some of the most important measurables? And talk to us through this process of regression analysis that you do for the rookies.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Bradley. I appreciate it. I love doing podcasts, so I was really thrilled that you wanted to have me on, especially this is the first one of the season. So I haven't got to talk about this. I have some buddies that I vent to about it, but most of them aren't as nerdy as me. All right, so I'll dig into what regression is first. A lot of times when we're having these conversations on Twitter or we're ranking players, and when I say we, I mean like data analysts, and I mean like next level data analysts who are really nerds, because we're not just pulling random stats. There's a process called regression analysis, and there's a few different ways to do it. You can do machine learning, or you can do linear, quadratic regression, log. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. But essentially, what you're doing is you are analyzing a data set. So for example, if we want to figure out how good or what connections or metrics have a correlation to fantasy points, we basically input a fantasy player. So what I do is I look at college data, and then I compare that to fantasy points, like in the NFL. So what did, for example, Julio and Amari, like those guys are producing pretty well in the NFL, or right. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. What did those guys have in college, and did they have things in common that made them all more successful? And then vice versa, what were players lacking that made them less successful in the NFL, right? So you do that and you measure, I mean, we're talking literally 300 different metrics, like yards per team pass attempt, yards per reception, or catches, literally, like you name it, it's very advanced data. And we're not just looking at it from like one perspective. We're looking at career averages, career last, career best, we're trying to figure out which one is the most predictive, right? And so we do that for all positions. And when you do that, I guess the best way to say it is it'll start to eliminate some of these metrics and say, yeah, this one definitely doesn't matter. And as you start refining things, so I don't want to get too much into the weeds because it's hard to explain what this is, but basically it'll tell us what matters and what doesn't. Right. And then it'll build a formula off that based on historical data, right? So based on all the players that have been good, we find that this, and this matters, and this is how much it should matter. Okay, so it's not like a process where we pull random stats and we're like, well, this guy's yards per team attempt is this. Like, why does that matter? Well, it matters because historically, when we analyze those metrics, it has a connection or a relationship to more fantasy points. So if you want me to get into the details of positions, I can tell you which metrics matter or wherever you want to go from here.
Well, it makes sense, though, that a player who's good in college will also be good in the pros. Like it seems as though if a player is commanding a high target share in college, then the coaches are looking to get him the ball. And that type of skill set is going to probably be translatable, but it's not 100%. It's not a 1.0 correlation.
Facts.
But at the same time, like, a 0.6 or 0.8, correlation is going to be amazing. Looking at some of the correlation data that I've seen posted on Twitter here and there, like if you get a 0.4 or 0.5, like you're pretty happy about.
Oh yeah,
some of those.
You're going to be thrilled. I mean, it's so hard to do that because this isn't like we're predicting something that's predictable. We're trying to predict human nature, and like I guess somebody can argue that is predictable, but in the sense of like fantasy points and human behavior, it's much more complicated than that. So it's not just target share. Like I wish it was that simple because that'd be awesome, right? This guy, right. But because if you look at like a team like Alabama, you're gonna have 3 studs, or Ohio State, like 3 wide receivers that are studs. The target share is not going to be as high for that player as it would if they went to a different school, most likely.
Right. Thinking about like dominator rating, like you have to adjust for the level of play, like a Mike Straken or a Jalen Darden, who are they had really high dominator ratings in college, but at the same time they weren't playing the type of competition that the Ohio States, the Chris Olaves of the world, are playing against. So yeah, I think it's not just one stat or 2 stats or 3 stats that we're going to look at, but what are some of the most important data points per position that you take into account?
Sure. So first off, I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people will use that as an example of why this methodology is flawed, right? So if you have a guy like, I guess Christian Watson's a good example. He was a FCS player instead of FBS, right? Well, they're like, how do we compare Christian Watson, who has dominated or produced this over here, when we know that level of competition is not the same, right? And that's a great question. Well, we have 2 other metrics. So I guess I'll get directly into the metrics for wide receivers because this is a good time to. So we look at, for wide receivers, we look at career average receptions per team pass attempt. So how often is that player receiving the ball per times that it's passed, right? So that's one thing. Career average, not career best, not career last, career average. And then we look at early declare versus non-early declare. If you are able to dominate as a junior, an NFL player or NFL team scouts think that you're really good and draft you early, you're going to look really good. And so that leads me to my third metric that matters for wide receivers, and that is draft pick. So that goes into feeds into what you were talking about, where like you have a guy maybe from the FCS who's dominated poor competition. Well, the beautiful thing is I don't have to figure out how good that player is because the NFL is going to do it for me.
Right.
So you're going to say, okay, we value Christian Watson at a first-round draft pick, right, or whatever it may be. And my model just says, okay, this guy was picked 25. He's a non-declare, and this is what his production looks like. And it basically spits out a number. And then I can go compare those numbers to all other prospects to figure out and gauge who he's comparable to and a percentile, right? So, which is really interesting because a lot of people have talked about this wide receiver class not being that great. I've seen some talk it up, but I've got 3 wide receivers in the 95th percentile of this class. So that's really good.
Would you mind sharing at least one of those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Drake London, wide receiver 1, right?
Yeah. I'll I'll share 2 of them. So
Okay.
the problem is I put it behind a paywall, guys.
Well,
If you're
yeah,
interested,
yeah. So make sure you check out Jake's. Jake, where can we find the full version of your rankings?
you can find the full Nerdum. It's a website listed in my bio. So like normally it's a Patreon, but I did what's called like Ko-fi or coffee, I guess is what it's supposed to say. But if you go to my Twitter bio, you can find it there. It's $10 one-time fee, and you'll have access. Just shoot me a DM if you're interested. We'll get you sorted. Anyways, so I don't want to spill
in the YouTube chat as well. Y'all.
Oh, awesome! Thank you so much.
Boom. Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah. So basically, I don't want to spill all the beans, but my number 1 receiver.
Just one coffee bean, right? One.
Yeah, yeah. I got you. One coffee bean. There we go. Drake London. Drake London. I actually have some comps that I was looking at yesterday. So it's really hard to do player comps, first of all, but basically I look at players that are similar percentile as far as production, predicted draft cap right now, and then early versus non-declare. And then basically, my model says this guy is whatever percentile. So I compare him to guys that are similar percentile, and then I look at similar size and speed. So we got some pretty dang good comps for old Drake London. We got Demaryius Thomas, AJ Green, Dez Bryant, Alshon Jeffrey, Kenny Britt, and Inkil Harry. So pretty solid comps.
Seems like an 80+% hit rate for those types of players.
Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. Like, we could, if we extended the list a little further, there's actually another rookie who comps with this player, and then it was like Dwayne Jarrett. It was just an absolute miss, but he really wasn't one of the best comps, so that's why he got cut.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of guys you can compare to when you have. I think I'll analyze 700 and something. So there's a lot.
You have a sample size. We have other players to compare to. He's Drake London. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 43 right now on Underdog Fantasy. I think that's a pretty good deal for a wide receiver who's projected to go first round. Right? He's projected to be drafted in the first round. He's Player Profiler's wide receiver 1. He's he's PFF's wide receiver 1. Player Profiler's wide receiver 3. He may be the first wide receiver like drafted off the board. He didn't perform at the combine, but do you have any concerns about Drake London because he didn't perform the combine? He didn't test USC's pro day. Yeah, I mean, you posted his 540 dunk video, so it can't be that low. But talk to us a little bit more about Drake London, and maybe are there any concerns that you have about him?
Sure. So I guess, nobody's bust proof. But we do have a pretty good idea. We're pretty good at predicting wide receivers. We have enough data to where we can feel pretty confident. So, I mean, there's definitely risk as far as like, what was it, ankle injury he suffered? Is that correct? It was some injury.
He suffered a season-ending ankle injury. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good, obviously. But no, the beautiful part of you bringing up the combine, like all of my data says that combines don't matter, right? Like it doesn't matter what players score, right? But in a weird roundabout way, it actually may, because if that affects draft capital, if the NFL coaches are influenced by it, then it does matter. But I don't have to account for it because the draft pick would account for it. Right. So that's the beautiful part of that. So like, yeah, I have zero concerns about his NFL combine unless I guess NFL coaches have a concern. But I don't think it will. I think he's my issue is not everybody's consensus wide receiver. Like no one has the same, like it's not consensus wide receiver 1 this year.
No.
So my concern is he's going to go to Packers or somewhere just ridiculous, and then it's going to inflate his value, and I'm not going to get my guy, So I don't like that. Looks as a question. How do you balance forecasting?
Yeah, we'll post it right here.
Okay.
Yeah, so how do you balance? Koenig 52 is asking, how do you balance forecasting how successful a player would be based on analytics, but then square that with only 20% of wide receivers in the first round to actually hit? Is that true?
Jake, how do you balance forecasting how successful a player would be based upon analytics, but then square that with only 20% of what? I don't know. I don't know the data to say that. I don't know if I agree.
20%, but we have seen some big first round misses lately. We've seen the John Rosses, the Jalen Ragers, the N'Keal Harrys of the world. Like, were there any red flags for those type of prospects that stood out to you? Maybe.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, I wasn't as big of a nerd back then. So I've only been doing this for 2 years now. So
Okay.
this is year 2. But the thing is, Koenig, I don't know your first name. I don't know if you're probably a follower, so I'm sure we've spoke. So if you got your first name, you can shoot it out to me, and I'll reference you that way. But yeah, I mean, wide receivers you can also look at. I mean, for example, was it Jamar Chase last year, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle? Those are all first round guys who all were hits. And then hell, Elijah Moore scored 3rd in my model last year. He also did really well, but he wasn't a first round pick. But then, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there were misses. Terrace Marshall, but Rashad scored 4th in mine. So I mean, I think wide receivers have a more successful hit rate than that. You can send me the data on that, and I'll check it out. But I don't think that's accurate based on what I've seen.
All right. We'll move on to another wide receiver, and this has set the Twitter people ablaze. They want to know more about Wandel Robinson. They want to know why you love Wandel. I mean, he's 5'8", he's 178. Granted, he broke out at age 18, had almost a 40% target share last year, ran a 4.40 at the combine. But Jake, he's 5'8". Is he Rondell Moore 2.0? I mean, okay, Rondell Moore is not, I don't think he's a faceplant at all, but like what, how can you build us up from the hurt that we felt from Rondell Moore last year?
So Rondell Moore, okay, so it's hard for me to argue in favor of Rondell Moore. I think he scored 5th or 6th in my model, so not bad. 6th, maybe 7th last year, so not bad. And the thing is, I don't think he's a bad receiver. I know he was pretty successful after the catch last year, and then Cliff Kingsbury, is that right? Cliff Kingsbury, is that right? Cliff Kingsbury
for
offense. Oh, it's Tarek. I know Tarek. Sorry, I'll get to that in a second.
We'll come back to that question. We'll come back.
Yeah. I don't remember what I was talking about, man. My mind races.
So Rondell Moore, Cliff Kingsbury. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Rondell Moore scores pretty well in my new model still. With Christian Kirk gone, if they don't bring in another wide receiver, I think it's going to be pretty safe to say. I think he's going to be fine. He's actually a guy that I'm trying to trade for one of my leagues, so hopefully he's not watching this podcast right now. But I'm not trying to pay a lot, you know.
Right.
Where did he go? Was it 2nd round?
He was a 2nd round pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2nd round says that a team likes you. Christian Kirk's out the door. DeAndre's still there. He's got an opportunity to step up there.
AJ Green isn't there.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, excuse me, if they don't bring in another player or they draft a wide receiver late, Christian Kirk's got a real opportunity to be the wide receiver 2 there. So I mean, obviously in Dynasty we're not playing it. We're not, doing this year to year, but 2nd round draft capital and his production in college, I think he's going to be fine. So you compare him to Wandell Moore. Or I knew I was going to do that. I do that every time.
It's a Freudian slip. It's when you say one thing but you mean your mother.
Yeah. Wandel Robinson. So ironically, and first I want to preface this with, I promise you this is not bias, but I am a UK fan. So it's not bias because it's literally just an interpretation of data. I'm not trying to get things to fit any bias. It's just, hey, based on things that matter, input formula, based on where he's going, he scores really well in my model. A lot of people are like, well, I just can't take him there. And it's like, well, so personally, here's what I do. So I create tiers, right? So like right now I have 3 wide receivers in tier 1 and then 3 wide receivers in tier 2. Wandell is one of those receivers in tier 2. And I believe he scores 5th. But I promise you, I would rather take the other 2 wide receivers because I believe that both of those other wide receivers are safer picks. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are like, well, can he be good at 5'8"? And we just don't have a good sample size of players that have produced at his level in college that went on to the NFL. I think Jamison Crowder is similar size. There's a couple other guys, but there's just not many who are actually
Deshaun Jackson, Scotty Miller, T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah, Deshaun Jackson, pretty good. T.Y. had some good years as well. And what was the other? Scotty Miller?
Scotty Miller, yeah.
Yeah, Scotty's still young. Hold on, I do want to reference this one question, though. Ferris Gainsman, can you throw that one up there?
Yeah, definitely. Ferris is asking, how important is early breakout age? And being an early declare for wide receivers. A lot of people like Olave and Dotson, but should we be concerned with that part of their evaluation? Like Olave, he's a senior, right?
So first off, we will circle back to Wandel, but I was excited to talk about this one. So this is talked about a lot in the analytical community. Now I measure both of these. So I put both in my model for wide receivers. And before I added in early declare, it did care about breakout age. It's like, okay, this is important. When I added early declare, it made breakout age no longer relevant, which means that early declare is much more predictive for fantasy success than breakout age. So we don't care about breakout age. We do care about early declare. It is much more successful in predicting fantasy points. So I like Dotson. He played really well against a lot of teams, but the fact that he couldn't do it until he was a senior, that's concerning. I mean, he's got a year to develop on these other guys who didn't need that extra year. So we'll see what the NFL thinks. I like him, but my model doesn't love him. I don't mind spitting this one out. We probably don't have that many people that actually compete with me anyway, so here we go. All right, we got Johan Dodson at 11. So that's where he's currently projected, and he's at the bottom of tier 3 for me. But still, a guy that I don't have a problem taking late. I do a little bit of tape watching too, and I did like what I saw from Johan Dodson. I went and looked at his stats. He played some pretty good teams, produced pretty well. I don't like it that he did as a senior. That was my biggest, definitely my biggest concern with him. Olave, kind of the same thing. I know a lot of people talk about internal competition. Well, I mean, everybody has to deal with that. So I don't give any points for if you waited till you were a senior, even though you had great internal competition. I mean, players, Elijah Moore still broke out. He was an early declare. DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, all were early declares, all competed against each other.
Yeah, Dotson, 5'11", 178. He'll be 22 when the season starts. He did run a 4.43, but, there are in that range of outcomes, once again, like the Scotty Miller, T.Y. Hilton, Tyler Lockett comps. Like the ceiling comp could be Tyler Lockett, but the floor could be, I don't know. He's going to be getting draft capital, but it's not going to be, I don't think, Scotty Miller low level, like 4th, 5th round.
Let me see. Actually, I'll tell you who I got for comps. You said, well, I'm not going to know 5'11" off the top of my head. Give me a second. I'll give you production comps.
Okay.
Players that he score similar and points per game. You said Johan Dodson, Terrace Marshall, ironically. Greg Little, Donnie Avery, Andre Roberts, Sterling Shepard.
I like Shepard. Shepard's underrated.
Cortland's in there. Lockett's actually would be a pretty good comp there. Yeah. Tyler Lockett would probably be my best comp for Johan Dodson. Chris Godwin. So, I mean, you're going to have some misses. You're going to have hits with every player.
He feels like a coin flip almost.
That's how everyone after the top 4 fell for me. Like
it might have to do with how what their draft capital is, what team uses them, what the coaching staff wants to use them. Like a lot more things need to go right for, after those first few wide receivers, I think.
Yeah. Oh, so let me circle back to Wandel and finish up
there.
All right. My brain goes a billion places, and then I like to
let's do it.
Thoughts out. So Wandel Moore. Let me pull up my Wandel comps. Give me a second, fellas.
Yeah, it's all good. So in the meantime, Wandel Robinson is going as the wide receiver 103 right now in Underdog Fantasy. He's like that late. You're talking about at wide receiver 103. Other comps going that late are Olamide Zaccheaus, Antoine Wesley, Josh Reynolds. I mean, I'd take Deontay Harris, I think, over him, but like Antonio Brown's
I would not.
Antonio Brown's going ahead of him right now. Yeah. Auden Tate is going ahead of him. Amari Rodgers is going ahead of him. Byron
That's
Pringle.
Gross. Amari's not good.
Like these, Amari's really bad. I wrote an article last year for Fantasy Data, and I was like, Amari's going to be a great NFL player. He's going to be a terrible fantasy asset. He's an undersized blocking slot receiver.
All right. Eric, here we go. So let's see what he said here. Eric said, oh, it's Tarek. I apologize.
Yeah.
Tarek said, Wandel's height. Not once has a guy finished 5'8". Yeah, but how many guys have played in college in the SEC at 5'8", produced the way Wandel did, and then also was an early declare? It's just we don't have examples of that. So yes, you can say that there's no guys under 5'8". Well, first off, how many guys under 5'8" have been drafted, and how many have been drafted that produce the way Wandel has? And I can tell you, it's very, very few. So I just pulled up his data here, and I'll tell you why he scores so well. I actually have him projected in the third, okay, and he still scores as my wide receiver 4 because he's an early declare, so you get a ton of points for that. And then his receptions per team pass attempt is 21%, which is higher than Drake London, higher than David Bell, higher than Garrett Wilson, higher than Treylon Burks, higher than Chris Olave, higher than Jalen Tolbert, Johan Dodson, literally dang near every player in this class. And that's good. And he came from the SEC, and he did that all by junior year. Yeah, Mari's trash. I love when people draft a player because they have a good landing spot. And I'm like, nope.
Literally after the draft, the Packers were interviewed like, why'd you draft Amari Rodgers? And they said, well, because he's good on special teams and he's a good blocker. And that is not what you want to hear.
That's not what you want to hear as a receiver.
No.
Hell no. That's funny. I'll tell you, last year there were so many surprises. And I don't know if you can see, I'm a Titans fan. So I was expecting in the third us to take a guy like who was available in the third. Seth Williams was available in the third.
What could have been? Right?
Tylan Wallace. Yeah, like these guys produce, and then Seth Williams, he goes 6 or 6. He went in the
6th round to the Denver Broncos.
His production was so good.
Now he's behind Travis Fulgham.
No, he's not. I actually just checked this yesterday. So he's moved up the depth chart. He's behind Cortland Sutton.
Jake giving us updated.
Yeah, I liked Seth a lot. I was shocked that he didn't go higher than that. I was shocked that we took Dez Fitzpatrick, who couldn't outperform Tutu. We took him over Seth Williams, and Seth Williams fits that Titan build of like they want bigger players who are able to block off the ball, which is I guess they thought Dez could do. I don't know why, but
well, when Denver selected him, they asked, "Well, why'd you select Seth Williams?" And they said, "Well, he's a good enough special teams player."
Really? That's what they said? Oh my gosh! But here's what's interesting though, and that's a good point. And I'm defending Seth because I like Seth a lot. He's one of those guys that's free. So if you have extra room or you're playing a deep league, just add him. So I was reading into it a little bit. And he's even though he's like the 7th or 8th receiver, they liked him enough last year to carry him on the active roster for almost every single game. And then when he did play, I think he had 2 catches for 42 yards. He looked good, but he didn't get to play much. So if Cortland gets hurt, which is very possible, we might get to see Seth Williams this year.
Maybe.
Fingers crossed. Not that I want somebody to get injured, but I would love to see Seth Williams.
All right, we've got a few more questions. Let's take a look at we're going to come back to the hit rate of wide receivers.
Okay.
Tarek brought up some clarification saying the top 12 finished in fantasy. Historically, wide receivers is similar to quarterbacks. Good example, 2020 stacked wide receiver class. I think it's difficult to just expect a rookie wide receiver to immediately provide you a wide receiver 1 season. Like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, I think we've been spoiled, to be honest.
Right.
Like, I don't think that those are the comps that we should expect from every draft. Like, I don't know if we're going to get even one of those this year. At the same time, like, look at what, like, taking a step back, Joe Burrow was throwing to both of these players, in the national championship game. And so I don't know if it's fair to say, like, the hit rates are so bad, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that with wide receivers, we see huge jumps from year 1 to year 2 and year 2 to year 3. So I think that that's more so what I'm looking for as a dynasty player. Like, I want players who produce to a certain threshold. Like, I'm okay with where Rondell produced year 1. I'm not okay with where Terrace Marshall produced year 1.
Facts.
So like to put them in the same face planner conversation is extremely unfair. I just want to get that out of the way. But when it comes to wide receivers, like I'm happy getting them. Like you're going to get them the cheapest in your rookie drafts, but like I want to know that like they're going to produce more later. Like I'm not banking on them giving me wide receiver one production year one.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I actually have point differential data for receivers moving from, now this is based on, so 2017 to 18, your rookies who moved into year two, on average produced 49.6 more points a game. That's very good. From 2018 to 19, rookies to year two, it was 19 points per game. Sorry, not points per game, 19 points per year. That is not points per game. Jesus.
I was about to say
they Jake?
They are. I was like waiting for you to like think it through for a moment.
Yeah.
Give it you.
Year points. Yeah, yearly points. And then in 2019 to 2020, it was 15 more points over the year. So, I mean, it shows that players typically progress from one year to the next. This was my argument for Claypool and T. Higgins last year. T. Higgins, I was right on. I was wrong on Claypool. So,
well,
it is what it is.
Ben got worse. And
yeah, he did.
Nevertheless, let's take a look at a few more questions. As a UK fan, wasn't he the whole offense? Does your model filter out extreme volume? Like Wandel Robinson, he had a new coach his junior year, one of the coaches from the Rams who used him in the Cooper Kupp role. And I think that if a team drafts him who says they're going to use him as a weapon, I'm eyebrow raising. But if they're going to use him we're going to use him as one of our wide receivers. Like if he gives Elijah Moore vibes, for how the New York Jets were like, he's going to be starting day one or pretty close to day one. We're excited for what he can bring to the team. Like that's what I want to hear and what I want to see in these training camps. But if he's going to be relegated like a Tavon Austin or a Cordarrelle Patterson, like that's real problematic for me.
Yep. I mean, teams are going to have to find a role for him. As a UK fan, wasn't he he was a big part of the offense. But here's the thing. So if you're an SEC team playing Kentucky and you know that Wandel is a huge portion of the offense, why can an SEC defense not key in on one player and stop him? Right? That it shouldn't be that simple. But to that point, we actually run a lot at UK. Chris Rodriguez had a really good year. A few other running backs. I'm not as nerdy with college football as I am NFL, but Chris Rodriguez had a really good year, and UK does a really good job running the ball. So he wasn't the whole offense. He was their main. He was most of their passing offense, though. But yeah, my model doesn't measure for that. But fortunately, SEC teams, when they stack up against Wandel, they're game planning for him. So when they can game plan for him and he still performs, that speaks volumes of him.
All right, let's take a look at a couple other questions, and then we're going to move on to the controversy that is Kenneth Walker.
Oh, love it.
Okay. So you referenced Wandel as SEC wide receiver, so you're familiar with how much more successful wide receivers from the SEC, Big Ten are in the NFL.
So I think no, I'm not. There's no data for me that would agree or disagree with this. I've tried to measure it in the past. I didn't this year. But I'll say that, yeah, I think generally the SEC and Big Ten are producing the most football players in the NFL, just because they're the two biggest conferences and most elite. That's where most of the best players do go. So yeah, I mean, I do like SEC receivers. I like Big Ten receivers. Yeah, I have no disagreements there, but I don't have enough data to prove anything.
Okay, all right. It looks like all of the questions are in the chat have been addressed so far. So let's get into another spicy topic. That is Kenneth Walker. And Graham Barfield, a couple days ago, declared Kenneth Walker as his running back one. And all of fantasy Twitter lost their minds. Kenneth Walker's not being drafted as the running back one. He's being drafted right now in Underdog Fantasy as the running back 28. Second rookie running back off the board behind Breece Hall, who's going as the running back 16. So running back 28, the comps like in that range, the ADP comps are AJ Dillon, Damian Harris, Devin Singletary, Tony Pollard.
Hold on a second. You're saying Najee Harris is going 16th?
No,
He's the 16th running
Damian
back?
Harris.
Oh, I thought you said Najee.
No. Wait. The 16th running back right now in ADP on Underdog is Breece Hall.
Okay, I thought you said Najee. I was like, what? Okay, tracking.
Najee is running back 5 right now in
ADP. We're good. Yeah, we're good.
Whew. But Javante's jumping up there. He's now leapfrogged Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon with the Melvin Gordon rumblings.
Yep.
Although the Baltimore Ravens have met with a few of these running backs who are projected to these top 5, top 7 running backs. So I that worries me as a JK. Actually, it doesn't worry me because I don't have much shares of JK.
I don't either, dude. I do not either.
I didn't trade him away. I just was unfortunate. I didn't get much J.K. Dobbins, but I have a total of 9. I have 0% in one of the big board drafts and 9% in the others because I wanted just a little bit of J.K. Dobbins, but the flags for me in Baltimore are Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are not going to be ready. And that's concerning, especially given some of the data that was just put out today from some of the PTs and doctors and everything regarding
I didn't know that.
And it seems like running backs and linebackers, based on the data that's being told to us, that they have less of a lower chance of recovery than other positions. So
I was not aware of that. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, so just some heads up. But anyway, so Kenneth Walker, we're going to bring it back. He's running back 28. Seems like there's a clear tier gap between Hall, Walker, and like the other running backs in much of fantasy Twitter. Has the lack of pass catching utilization in college, is that a data point that's overblown, or is that a pretty big part of your evaluation of running backs? And how does that impact your view of Kenneth Walker?
Love it. So first off, I think I saw whoever you were talking about. That's why I told you I've been getting a little bit irritated on fantasy Twitter. Just the stuff that I've been seeing. Now, again, you can't say for a fact that somebody's wrong, but there's just so much data that suggests that somebody's wrong, and that's where I'm like, I take a deep breath. I'm like, all right, we're a nice guy. We're not gonna go tweet somebody. I don't do all that.
I've never forgiven Matt Waldman for putting Trey Sermon as the running back 1 of last year's class. So
see, I was high on Trey Sermon, but not that high. Like I think he was my RB4, but yeah, definitely not RB1. And that if I would have seen that, I'd be like, all right, dude, I like Trey, but what are we doing here? You know? And that's kind of how I feel about Kenneth Walker. I like Kenneth Walker as a running back. I think he's a great runner. Okay. But we play fantasy football. This isn't real football. It's based on real football, but you get points for catching the ball. This is PPR. Most people are playing half PPR or PPR, right? And so for running backs, here's what we care about. Maybe.
Well, in the half PPR setting, you could see Kenneth Walker getting like 7 or 8 touchdowns if he gets like a pretty significant first and second down role. And that would justify running back 28, I think.
Yeah, I didn't think that was an unfair spot, by the way. But just okay, so for me, I look at draft pick for running backs. I look at career average receiving touchdowns per game played. That's a big one. And that's not me picking a random stat. That's saying historically, guys who do well at this in college go on to see higher fantasy points. That's not me picking and choosing. I wish it was. I could create a narrative for anything, but that's not what I do.
Right.
And then the other is career average yards per team attempt, which encompasses that's strictly a running measurement. So he's a great runner, and I have no doubt about that. I've watched the film. My data says he's a good runner, but my data says that catching the ball matters, and I totally agree. And anybody who disagrees, I don't know what we're doing because this is again, it's PPR or half PPR. Most leagues, if it's not, ignore me. If you're playing standard, then Kenneth Walker's a little bit higher in non PPR, but most leagues are not that way. This is what we're referencing, and people. My biggest issue is that people love to create narratives. Okay, and we can create a narrative that would explain any player's lack of production, right? Jameson Williams. Well, he couldn't produce because he played at Ohio State and all these other guys were there. Okay, so why couldn't he do that? Like, if he's good, he's good. Kenneth Walker. Well, he doesn't catch passes because they don't scheme that. Or maybe he's just not good at catching passes. And I don't know. But you don't know that he's good at it either. If anybody can go catch a pass in the open field in practice, I can do that. In football in high school, you don't have a linebacker chasing you down. Like it's totally different. So these comparisons and these reaches to explain a gap in data is mind-boggling to me. Like we can do that for anything. Oh well, who's a good example? Christian Watson. He would have declared earlier if he wasn't playing a guy with a terrible quarterback. Maybe. Or maybe he just wasn't good till late. You can do that for anything. So in fantasy football, I avoid that. And so Kenneth Walker's not my RB2. And a lot of people don't like that, but he doesn't have the pass catching production that justifies it. So maybe he can catch, but where you're taking him right now, where's he going? Like ADP is probably what, third overall, and I don't know where he's at.
I haven't done enough mocks, but I've seen him go, like third or fourth, or in one QB rookie dynasty drafts.
Without a doubt, I'm taking at least 5 players before him, at least, and I'm confident in that because those other guys aren't as risky. If you're spending a top 5 pick, I'm not looking for a low floor guy. I'm looking for a high floor, high upside, and Kenneth Walker does have high upside, but his floor is low. So, I mean, it's just a matter of choosing to be risk averse. And historical data says that he's probably not that good at catching the ball. I mean, we can argue about it, but it's not like me. There's nothing beyond data that I'm stating here. It's not, hey, I don't know. I don't even know. This one's such a frustrating topic for me because, I agree that he's a good running back, but we have no idea if he can catch. And anybody who says otherwise, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. We don't have examples of it.
Well, we might have an example of him. Melvin Gordon is playerprofiler.com's best comp, and Melvin Gordon had 22 career catches in 45 games, whereas Kenneth Walker had 19 career catches in 35 or so. So, and Melvin Gordon was used pretty well, but it was once again dump off Phillip Rivers, who loved to get his running backs involved in the passing game. So that narrative may be put to bed depending upon landing spot. But I think once again, that's going to be how an NFL team evaluates Kenneth Walker. Can he handle that type of role? Is the quarterback comfortable using him? Right. Once again, we're trying to craft narratives one way or the other, but that's what it required for Melvin Gordon to be successful. He didn't have the pass catching comps, but he was a good running back in college at Wisconsin, and he landed on a team and at a quarterback with a quarterback that was willing to just give him the ball. So, we try to craft narratives, but at least when they get drafted, we know right away what we're looking for too.
So, I mean, if he goes in the first round, I think that tells us a lot. I think that would tell. I don't think he's going to. But if he were to go in the first round, that would tell us. Well, yeah, he's clearly a 3-down back. But going to anything after the first, I don't think we can draw that conclusion. And like I said, it's just a narrative, and we can look at Le'Veon. People love to reference that. Well, Le'Veon didn't catch. He went to Michigan State. Look how good Le'Veon was at catching. Yeah, he was. But again, we still don't know. That doesn't mean that because Le'Veon was good doesn't mean Kenneth Walker's good. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that's high school that we have, and the high school linebackers.
Someone was arguing, well, he even had some interceptions in high school.
And I don't know. I'm not saying that's. I mean, it's obviously not bad that he was catching in high school. It's just not anything that we can draw a meaningful conclusion from.
I mean, he does have.
Is he 80 or 90th percentile in pass blocking? Is that what's needed for third down?
I don't know.
I do know.
I mean, have you seen some of the running backs that NFL teams have put out on third down? Like,
Yeah, and they usually don't go out there many times.
yikes.
I mean, you give up a sack on third down in the NFL. It's just that's important. A lot of people are thinking strictly from pass catching. Maybe he just
You're
can't block.
Keyshawn Bond, you know?
Yeah, as Ferris he's a terrible pass blocker. So what? Every third down, there's no chance he's running the ball, and he's going to be out wide catching passes when we have no clue if he can catch passes.
I mean, unless he's drafted by the Giants,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, true. I mean, and like I said, like he could be Derrick Henry. I don't think he is, but Derrick Henry doesn't really catch passes, and he's really good at fantasy. It's just, again, we're creating narratives, and I don't create narratives for my first-round draft picks. Those are guys that I feel like are safe. We all play fantasy different. I try and be smart about it. I don't think Kenneth Walker should be going top 5, and I'm pretty confident in that.
Okay. Well, you heard it here. Don't draft Kenneth Walker.
Top 5.
Okay. Let's get into a couple other running backs. First, more interesting for me. I know, Jake, you in the private DMs were like, let's not talk about this particular too much. And I said, but I want to talk about Isaiah Spiller. He's going as the running back 39 on Underdog Fantasy. He's the third rookie running back off the board right now. PlayerProfiler.com has him as second round draft capital, but PFF has him at sixth round NFL draft capital. It just seems like NFL Twitter, like fantasy Twitter, they're not seeing eye to eye. There's a huge discrepancy between the views of how fantasy Twitter, is wanting Isaiah Spiller to be this thing and pass catching. And you mentioned like scoring fantasy points, like he obviously shows more of that pass catching capability, but what are your views on Isaiah Spiller? He caught 74 passes over the last 3 years in college. I think we're at a crossroads here because the landing spot might be telling too for Spiller.
Yeah. I'm not, so when I watch Spiller, I'm not blown away by his tape. It's nothing, and I don't want to be known as a tape guy. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's all analytics first, and then I like to verify. Least important metric. I don't care. I don't care what Ray G said. I mean, I know the dude grinds, and I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's talking about, but what I'm talking about history. It's literally, here's data. I'm interpreting data. That's all it is. So you're just arguing with historical data. That's literally all it is. You can argue with me. I'm just presenting. I'm showing the case for historical data. Historically, if you can't catch, you're not going to be as good in fantasy. The only thing is we don't know if he can catch. That's all. Sorry. Still Kenneth Walker here, not Spiller. Spiller can catch, so he does pretty well in my model. I don't want to give out too much. Specific. I did see Tarek was asking about Rashad and Beatty, and I will just say Rashad and Beatty are liked by my model. I'm not going to give away any numbers outside of Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a clear-cut RB1. Anybody who says differently is probably more than likely wrong.
Okay, so you like Isaiah Spiller. He's got the pass catching.
Yep.
The draft capital thing is really what is bothering me right now, because as I said, like, we want to project these pass catching running backs in the second round, but we saw last year, like the Kenneth Gainwells of the world get relegated to. Gainwell was a 5th round pick, right? For the Eagles,
fourth round,
but still day three. Yeah. And the landing spot wasn't super great, but he had a couple upside weeks. How bad is it for Isaiah Spiller if he's a day 3 pick?
A day 3, I think it's bad. I mean, because I think he can catch passes. I don't think there's any issue with that. I don't want to. It's hard for me to dabble into these other things confidently, like his abilities as far as like athleticism. Like he seems like an okay athlete, but like it's just nothing about him. I'm like, yeah, that dude can ball. Like he just looks like just a guy, like he could be an NFL player, and I don't think he's gonna be a 3-down back anywhere. I'll confidently say that.
Yeah, some of his top comp for player profilers, TJ Yeldon.
let's see what I have. Now, I have players like, I'm trying to look at a pass catching back in here that looks.
Play style comp Devin Singletary.
Devin Singletary. That one's not far off. Spiller scores pretty close to Kareem Hunt, actually.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt shows up here too.
I think in my model, that's the closest as far as like pass catching backs. Now, like his actual like production, so he scores at 63 out of 100. He's I can't, percentile's not on the one I'm looking at, so I don't have that for you. But probably. Oh, hold on, it's over here. Give me 2 seconds. So I've got not Kenneth Walker. Isaiah Spiller's a 77th percentile. It's pretty good, but he's tier 2 guy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll move on pretty quickly. Ferris says he doesn't care if Spiller runs a 4.6. Fine. He does other things well, like catch the ball.
he does that well, and I agree. But I don't
he doesn't do both things well at all, that guy. Man, there's some chatter going on in the chat. I love it.
Love it though. Yeah, it's fun.
Absolutely. Rashad White. Let's get into Rashad White for a couple minutes, because Rashad White is almost like I'm not going to say the opposite, but like almost similar to Isaiah Spiller. He's similar to Isaiah Spiller in that the NFL is not viewing him as a worthwhile back, but fantasy Twitter is all in love with Rashad White. Player Profiler's best comp for him is David Johnson.
Where do I have David Johnson here? I don't have him as a great comp, but Rashad scores well in my model. I like Rashad. I think Rashad's one of the best values in the draft. I've said that. I'm not going to tell you guys where I have him, but I think Rashad is underrated as well. He passes, or he catches the ball well, but a lot of people are like, well, because I look at career average. So I actually went in and I separated his FCS stats from his FBS, and I reran the numbers to verify that I wasn't getting some skewed data. And even in FBS, dude dominated. He was such a huge part of Arizona State's offense. He ran well and he caught really well. He's good in the open field. I really like Rashad White. I think he's underrated. I'm trying to think of a good comp here.
Yeah, so Koenig is asking, like, why is Bradley saying that the NFL doesn't like these particular players? And I'm looking at two different sources of round projection, playerprofiler.com and PFF, who have more insights into listening to these coaches and what they have to say. Granted, all of this is like grains of salt with coach speak, but like you hear things about Rashad White, and then you say, well, an NFL team may not value him in the same way that fantasy players would view his athleticism, or he might be more of like looking at some of the cons for Rashad White, loosey-goosey running style, like a wide receiver playing running back instead of an actual running back running the ball, not confident between the tackles, work in progress pass protection. So he has to work on those things to be a third down back if he's going to be pass catching. But like PFF has Rashad White as a 6th round draft capital player.
Wow.
And Player Profiler has him as a 4th rounder. So these are still day 3 picks, like both views, like they're different. 4th and 6th round is still pretty significant, but that he's from those two sites, a day 3 pick is an eyebrow raise to me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's ironic that you brought that up, and I'm glad you did, though. Like I said, Rashad scores very well in my model, and I have Rashad currently now. Again, my model accounts for draft picks. I have him currently projected at 116th overall, and he still scores very well. I think there's a decent chance with the scarcity at the position this year that a team sees a more complete back than some of these other guys. Like, there's no questions with him. Like, he's a decent runner. He's a great catcher. Like, so that's a guy who could be a 3-down back, whether you believe he's that good of a runner or not, and whether NFL NFL coaches believe that. That's what I guess we don't know is what I'm trying to say. We'll find out how coaches feel about him, but I think he has the ability to be a 3-down back.
And that's what we saw from David Johnson. Like, he was not being drafted at that high draft capital. I think it was a 3rd-round pick, right, for Arizona. I think it was 3rd round, because they missed out on the I remember watching, it wasn't Hard Knocks, it's Amazon's version of Hard Knocks. Whatever. And they were doing this background version of Hard Knocks, and now I'm kicking myself. I can't remember what the show's title was, but they gave an insight into the draft, and the Cardinals wanted to draft Amir Abdullah.
Ooh.
Right. And they wanted to draft Amir Abdullah, and then they got sniped by the Lions, who drafted Amir Abdullah. And instead they were like, well, I guess we're going to have to settle for David Johnson.
It's weird how that works. I'm so conflicted every year. So, like, I struggle between, like, so obviously draft capital matters, right? But what about players who still score well, and, like, I guess in my model, guys who score well, like Rashad White, who is projected 4th round, that's not good. So, like, to me, that tells us that the NFL doesn't value him the way I do. But it's like, well, who knows more? I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no, I know more than an NFL coach. But historically, like, this guy should do well, right? And that's not an opinion. That's historical data. That's he should do well. But if the coach doesn't think that he should be playing, then he's not going to play. So
yeah.
I struggle with that. Like, Kadarius Toney's a really good example for a wide receiver, a guy who had no production but went 1st round. And it's like, okay. And then Seth Williams is the opposite, a guy who produced very well in college but had no draft cap. So it's like, it's just interesting, and I think you have to take everything with a grain of salt. So I like Rashad. If he gets day 3 capital, it's going to be tough to think. I mean, I could grab him later than I'd like, but I just, it's tough. It gets tough on day 3. Yeah.
Thanks, Koenig, for saving me there. It's all or nothing. There are a few seasons.
Gotcha.
There are a few seasons on Amazon, and I really like it. So, yeah, I'd recommend that. A little love or love for the RAS scores, hate for the PFF. Yeah, there are some things that PFF gets wrong for sure, but at the same time, like, it's just another lens through which we look at players. And I'm not diving as deep into the rookies. Like, I have all of these different I do best ball. Like, that's what I've been focusing on over the last little bit. But having different lenses through which you can view players, and not just having one, like, my only model is this, but also, like, what are other people saying, and then checking yourself versus the market is important, because you may be super duper high and so far high on a player, but then, like, you need to read the market of, like, if Rashad White, if you really like him and he's, let's say, a 3rd round pick instead, and that's exactly where you had him, like, you don't want to, like, reach too far if you know that he's going to come to you at a particular place and you know what you're going to get there.
So 2 points I'd like to make real quick. Raz, I measure it, Tarek. It's in my models. It's no good for predicting anything. What's cool about it, so I like to assess players within tiers, right? So, like, this year I have 3 wide receivers who are tier 1. So I think Raz could be useful. Then maybe if you have 3 guys that score really close, like, okay, well, I prefer alpha receivers, right? So if I have 2 receivers, Wandel and Drake London, for example, if they scored the same, 100% I'm taking Drake London over Wandel because I prefer that. And then the other point, what was you were talking about something?
Checking yourself versus the market.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I have guys that I love, Wandel and Rashad, and I think they're values, but and my rankings may tell you that they are better than what the market tells you. So I think that's a great example of a player you can trade back for. So you gain value while moving back and still getting your guy. So that's I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a great approach.
All right, awesome. Well, Jake, I know we're getting close to here at the end of the podcast. I'm really grateful for you taking the time talking about your process, your thoughts on a few particular players. If you have more questions for Jake or myself, be sure to send us DMs or comment on our posts. I'll be posting this video on YouTube. You can comment there, and I'll tag Jake when I post it on Twitter as well. But Jake, I want to say thank you for taking the time tonight, talking through these rookies, your process, your thoughts on Dynasty as well, and some of the metrics and getting into it. Really appreciate all that you did tonight, and thanks for tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very long-winded, so thanks for bearing with me as I dig into details that just probably don't even need to be discussed. But it's so fun to try and explain these things. I appreciate it, Tarek. Thank you. But yes, just thanks for having me, man. I had a great time. I want to leave everybody with one little message. Don't draft Kenneth Walker in your top 5. Don't do it. Don't do it. And
all right,
then
well,
later or come yell at me. It's okay.
Tag him, bookmark his tweets. You know, if you can bookmark his tweets, so you can find him at Dynasty Jake. Jake Estes does work FantasyNerds, YardsPer fantasy. He's a fantasy analyst there. And then, of course, earlier in the show, I posted the Ko-Fi for his link as well. You can check that out in his Twitter bio. And, of course, you can follow me at FFStalder. Follow the Fantasy Data YouTube page. Give us a like, subscribe, thumbs up, comments. We love it. It really helps what we're doing here at Fantasy Data. And also our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. If you have not used the promo code FFF, make sure you do. And your first deposit up to $100 will be matched 100%. So use promo code FFF. You can download the app or you can draft off of the desktop. I'm going to be doing a lot of live drafts this off season. Make sure you check them out on the YouTube channel. I'll be live streaming, sending out links. You can join in as well. For Jake Estes, I'm Bradley Stalder of Fantasy Data. Have a great evening, everyone.